Welcome back, everyone, to the final day of our Dinosis conference. I hope that you had a nice lunch. This morning, we discovered the use of citizen science to inform evidence based policies. Now, we will be discussing the Dinosis advocacy actions and our policy results in some of the countries where we have been working. We will start with the Dinosis advocacy plan at the European, national, regional, and local levels to discover the resulting strategic roadmap on governance. Also, the specific policy results in Portugal, Chile, and Uganda will be presented to move to the standardization of our methodology based on citizen science to monitor odor pollution. Finally, I will be sharing the very first green paper on odor pollution with you, and we will have an interactive session of questions and answers before closing the final conference. So, without further ado, I will introduce Anastasia that will be presenting our advocacy strategy. Anastasia Roniotes has over 29 years of experience in environmental policy formulation and advocacy at international, European, and Mediterranean levels. At the core of her work as senior manager of MIO Este, a federation of 133 NGOs from 25 countries, is awareness raising on key environment and sustainable development issues, promoting public participation, stakeholder engagement, and participatory science. Her involvement in the Dinosis project offered her the unique opportunity to comprehend the complexities in effectively addressing odor pollution, as we just saw this morning. So thank you very much, Anastasia, for your wonderful work during Dinosis as advocacy leader and for your continued support. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rosa. And actually, I should change my introductory text because it's a dead giveaway of my age. So
yes.
It was great to
Sorry
hear
about
you
this.
saying those few words. Anyway, I will, first of all, good afternoon to everyone. For us, it has been an amazing experience being part of Dinosis because we were not following closely the odor pollution issue. And it has been always so informative and interesting to follow these 3 days, learning more and more every time I hear all of the colleagues. So thank you to everyone. I will not take too long, I hope. I have kept my slides to a minimum. And I won't be repeating because we have heard all 3 days, but again, also quite a bit this morning. Just why Dinosis is where it is and how the odor pollution issue is complex and such a challenging issue. And the Dinosis advocacy actions relied exactly on this reality. And we had some very specific expectations at all the levels that Dinosis has been working on. So international, regional, national, and local levels. And what we hope to achieve is that by the end of the project or in the midterm, so a while after the project as well, that we would have significantly strengthened understanding of exactly what the odor pollution challenge is about, and that this would have as a further result that we would see odor pollution higher in policy agendas. Unfortunately, we have discovered in the early stages of the project, when we did our mapping of the situation, that even the words odor pollution are totally absent from very relevant policy documents at all levels of governance. So apart from this expected result, we also, of course, wanted to contribute to including citizen science in policy agendas. We are working, well, by our nature as the partner based in the Mediterranean, we, particularly in our region, which is a north-south interface, of course, Citizen science is not part of formal documentation or in operational work, and we really hoped to change this, at least partially with the opportunity of the Dinosis project. At the same time, it's important to have a good understanding of the further policy landscape that Dinosis had to work in. We began in 2018, and just a year and a half later, so midway through the project, we had a new European Parliament, a new Commission, which meant that we had to carefully plan our actions so that we didn't have to start all over again. And with the new European governance, we, of course, had the new Green Deal. And this brought a wave of reforms and the review processes of existing legal instruments. And we had to really track everything and contribute to those processes as well, and see which ones were closely linked to odor pollution, where we could strengthen citizen science. And this was, of course, we had to adapt our advocacy planning based on this reality. And of course, needless to say, we also had to consider the impacts of the global pandemic, because of course other health issues were of much more importance than our project agenda. As I said, we began in 2018, and you heard from earlier speakers that this year and just a bit before, a lot of things were happening at that point in time. And in fact, just 2 years before we started, I won't go into details. This is just a summary slide that you can refer to if needed. We had the European Commission and the European Parliament maintaining their position that a harmonized legal instrument is not necessary, and that odor pollution can be addressed sufficiently at a local level by the competent authorities of the EU member states. So it was in February of 2018 when the second affirmation came to play, and in March, Dinosis was launched. So the timing seems to have been spot on. But of course, in 2018, we started seeing some first concrete steps in the right direction. And we heard from Cynthia earlier about how we had the first European odor limit and the inclusion of odor in monitoring and odor management aspects in best available techniques for waste treatment in Europe. So based on this backdrop, we had basically two distinct phases in our advocacy actions. Our first phase was to inform and to make aware as much as possible as many of our targeted policymakers, decision makers, and other stakeholders, government officials, etc. Exactly where the problems lie, where the regulation gaps are, what the implications of that of this issue are, and how Dinosis plans to contribute. So it was a little bit political in the sense we had nothing to show starting off, but promising that we will have some results to share in the near future. At the same time, we had to, of course, try and influence as much as possible ongoing processes at all the levels that we have been discussing, so international, regional, local, and national. The second phase of the advocacy work would be sort of re-establishing contacts with everyone we had mapped out based on our very concrete project results. Of course, because our results came at the very end of the project, our advocacy actions are actually, a lot of our advocacy actions of this phase are beginning now. Because I'm trying to avoid hearing the little bell, which I'm not sure if Nora has or Florence has, I sort of compacted maybe 5 or 6 slides in this one slide. It might not make too much sense standing on its own, but I'll try to explain. This is basically our action plan. We have the 4 levels that we're addressing: the European, the local and national, the Mediterranean as a region, and the global levels. And under each of these categories, we did our mapping exercise. I've left a few questions in there so that I can be reminded to explain to you that this was an action plan that was co-created by all the partners of Dinosis. We all had to identify, well, we didn't have to, but we all together identified who can do what at which of these levels, who had strengths, and what could we realistically expect to achieve, each one of us. So at the EU level, we had quite a bit of work in mapping out a new European Parliament Commission, and a lot of the documents that and the consultation processes we would need to follow. And we tried to contribute as much as possible to those that were relevant to either odor pollution or citizen science. When it came to the local and national level, we did the same mapping in all of our pilot areas and identified how we could influence what, because as we have heard all of these days, the situation is totally different in each country. Of course, the approach was different, and of course, our expectations of how we would influence policy in each of the countries were totally different as well. For all of these processes, we created tools and we use them throughout. Most of them have been enriched along the way, like the Odor Observatory. And we had some high ideas and plans, for example, with this closing conference, which would have normally taken place in Brussels, with a session, as you will hear, at the European Parliament. We would have probably organized also some discovery walk or site visit, but all of these interesting and impactful advocacy actions, let's say, at the end of the project, we just couldn't do since we had to transform into online meetings. At the regional level in the Mediterranean, where we didn't have high expectations to have something radical happening by the end of the projects, we have, however, ensured and informed the secretariats of the United Nations Mediterranean Action Plan based in Athens, where 21 countries participate, including the whole of the European Union and the Secretariat of the Union for the Mediterranean, as well as very recently the Parliamentary Assembly of the Union for the Mediterranean. And another body that has been closely following the Dinosis progress is the Circle of Mediterranean Parliamentarians for Sustainable Development, whose chairperson is also on our advisory board. And all of these bodies are expecting our final deliverables, the green paper and all of the other documents, in order to inform them with our recommendations. And at the global level, of course, we have considerable work that has been done with the Aarhus Convention. You have noted, of course, throughout our meeting what valuable role the advisory board members have played. So, as Rosa informed a little bit earlier today, since just yesterday at the seventh meeting of the contracting parties of the Aarhus Convention, most of you know that it's all about public access to environmental information, participation in decision making, and access to justice. For the first time, we now have citizen science included with more than 10 references in the recommendations on the more effective use of electronic information tools. And also in the addendum, useful information is there as well. And we have been trying to influence this and making it happen, both from the citizen science partners and also from the environmental protection partners of DNOSIS. So in a way, we feel that we have contributed to this success. With this slide, it's basically an introduction of what you're going to hear by the next speakers. These are the final, let's say, achievements of the project, and they are our main advocacy vehicles from this point on. It is our mandate that despite the project's ending, that we will continue to implement our action plan with these very important final results of the project. And going out with a bang, you've heard about it already today and the previous days, but this final event at the European Parliament, hosted by MEP Maria Spiraki, will be taking place on the 28th, and it will be a very interesting discussion. We contacted the Secretariat of the Interparliamentary Group on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development earlier this year, and they were very willing and interested to co-host this event with us. And it will be a very interesting discussion because we will have some players that have not been part of the closing conference, like the DG Environment and the Committee of the Regions, and impacted citizens themselves. So I'm sure it will be a very interesting event. I wish it was physical and we could have all have met there, but still online it will be certainly with some very interesting takeaway messages, with, of course, our green paper being at the center of it. And I thank you very much. And I didn't avoid the bell, but
Thank you very much, Anastasia, for this wonderful introduction. In fact, the next presentation is on me, and this is one of the main results of the advocacy plan that Anastasia just presented. Just let me wait for the slides. 1 second. Thank you very much, Florence. And yes, I will present you the work that we did in the DNOSIS countries. So the scope and purpose of the roadmap, basically you have heard a lot that governments and environmental authorities have a complex task, as we saw this morning with the metropolitan area of Barcelona, in the application of other regulations and guidelines. There are as many approaches as countries, and sometimes the lack of a strong legislation minimizes citizens' protection. So this strategic roadmap that we produce for governance in Odour pollution serves to inform policymakers about the context and situation regarding odor pollution in Europe, focusing in the DNOSIS countries, which also can inspire the development of a robust legislation framework on the matter. So you already know this is very complex. We have a lot of challenges. We deployed our multi-level governance model with our multi-level engagement strategies in the different countries, and this resulted in the strategic roadmap that I will present right now. As a summary, you know that the situation in Europe, as we have also heard today, is basically regulating odors to the Industrial Emission Directive, the compliance of BREFs, and we just had the first other limit for waste biological treatment in waste treatment activities from 2018 at the European level. That's the panorama, and let's see what happened in the diagnosis countries. We structured the roadmap just for you to understand what I will be presenting from now on for all the countries in three phases for each one of the countries. First, we analyze the specific regulatory framework of each country. Then we summarize the actions done during diagnosis, including actions at the local level, in the pilots, actions also at the national level in the country, and then future recommendations for the next 3 to 5 years so that countries can continue the path towards regulating odor pollution. And I will start with Portugal. Today, later, we also will have representatives from APA and from Portugal and also from other countries. So I will be very brief and you will be hearing more details from them directly. So let's start with Portugal. Regarding the regulatory framework, there is no other pollution regulations yet in the country, and the national government has the responsibility. And usually, the Industrial Emissions Directive is applied, as in many other European countries. What we did in the NOSIS, we ran two pilots, one in the Tinto River by Limpor, and one in the municipality of San João de Madeira, run by the municipality itself. And also, we ran a lot of actions to raise awareness and also to raise capacity building on odor pollution in Portugal through APIA, which is the Environmental Engineering Associations from Portugal, which is also a consortium partner of the NOSIS. And we ran different webinars with a lot of stakeholders and also national congresses in odor pollution. We also created this high-level policy group with the participation of the ministry, the environmental Portuguese agency, San João de Madeira, of course, experts from the University of Aveiro, and many other stakeholders to work on the first proposal of national legislation on odor management, as Nuno will be explaining in a second. So our recommendations for Portugal is to advance on this regulation. We will see the advancements in a minute, and also not only produce the regulation, but also the technical guidelines that accompany this regulation, so that can include also some citizen participation to include the affected communities in decision making. Let's move to Italy now. Sorry, I will be very brief with each country, but you will find this strategic roadmap and also the green paper published in the Odor Observatory very, very soon. So I invite you to visit and read the details. In Italy, the regulatory framework resides in each of the regions. It's totally different from Portugal in this regard. And this causes a scenario with different legislations in the country, especially in the Lombardy, in the Trento, and the Puglia regions. And the Lombardy guideline, which is in fact where our pilot was based on, includes some participation of citizens through questionnaires, but do not set impact criteria on this, while Trento does. So what we did during the diagnosis, we had a pilot in Castellanza that Laura presented on Monday to demonstrate the effectiveness of complementing the diagnosis methodology with traditional approaches to give compliance also to the current Lombardy guideline. And as a result, we receive the message like the other situation has not changed yet, but we provided interested parties with a better and more informed way to look at this problem. So, of course, we cannot apply the methodology yet to give compliance to the guideline, the current existing guideline in the region, but it was recognized by the authorities, the complementary approach and the advantages of using the diagnosis methodology to involve citizens in the monitoring. So our recommendations, we saw that because of the general framework of the international, the Industrial Emissions Directive, sometimes can limit the implementation of the regional regulations because they are incompatible. We think that the level of legislative freedom of the Italian regions should be accompanied accompanied also by these technical and expert suggestions to avoid this type of regulations. And also we recommend that new guidelines include procedures to evaluate the grade of annoyance perceived by the populations, which is not currently included in the different guidelines existing in the country. What about Spain? We learned something this morning from Cynthia's presentation, that the responsibility of regulating others in this case relies on the local authorities, so a different situation from Portugal and Italy. We saw that we had a draft of regulation in Catalonia that was not approved due to this strong industrial opposition. We have an absence of upper legislation at the national, the regional, or the national level, so each municipality chooses a different approach, and in some cases they do not even follow European standards. So this is an issue. That's why we are working on this common ordinance to inform the different municipalities. So what we did during the diagnosis, we involved the AMB, as you know, in the Barcelona pilot. We created the Spanish standardization group to advance on the standardization of our methodology based on citizen science to monitor odor pollution. And we plan to publish this standard, which is quite advanced, by the beginning of 2022, as Cynthia will explain in a while. Also, for the recommendations, we think that yes, this working group that has been just constituted will elaborate a solid model for municipal ordinances in Spain. Also, that citizen generating data should be taken into account for informing policies and regulating odor pollution. And also, we think and we strongly believe that the standard will pave the way for the uptake of the methodology by environmental authorities, not only in Spain, but eventually in Europe. What about Germany? We learned today that this is one of the most advanced countries in regulating odor pollution. There are guidelines that apply field inspections and limit the exposure of odors based on odor hours. And it will be the first country to have the first odor limit in ambient air, as Gerhard was explaining this morning, next December, if I'm not wrong. So what we did in diagnosis, we ran a pilot in Germany, but the municipality in that case refused to participate in the German pilot. So what we did was to distribute the German version of the policy brief throughout all the state agencies. And we also participated in several conferences and seminars to try to introduce this new methodology for odor pollution monitoring. Now, as future steps, we know that these GOA guidelines will be compulsory in the 16 federal states. However, this is not strengthening citizens' position in other affected communities, so we recommend to increase citizen participation during and after the issuance of the operating permit. And also, we recommend, of course, to complement these traditional methods with the diagnostic methodology to increase the participation of the affected communities. Then we move to Greece. In this case, we have the opposite situation. There is no specific other legislation in Greece, and other problems are still considered as a part of the wider environmental air quality issue. So they are not considered specific pollutants. There is no integration of the particular issue of odor from the BREF guidance documents to the national legislation, and usually the Industrial Emissions Directive is adopted. What we did during diagnosis, we had the regional authority supporting the Greek pilot in Thessaloniki through a letter of support. This facilitated the engagement of the rest of the stakeholders in the region. It also increased trust, so it was very, very helpful. And although citizen science was initially not seen as crucial for environmental monitoring, neither by the regional authority or the other actors involved, it was at the end recognized the potential of complementing traditional methodologies and also for providing valid scientific data. Yes, thank you, Nora. I know we are running a bit late, but I will try to be fast. So our recommendations for Greece, even though there is no foreseen change in the regulation in the coming years, we know that the regional authority recognize this potential value of citizen science to monitor other pollution. So we hope also that maybe the event in the parliament that is hosted by a Greek MEP may change or contribute to change the situation. Let's see what happens. What about Bulgaria? In this case, there is no other regulation at national level, neither. They have an ordinance from 2012 that included the implementation of sanctions for other emitting industries. And usually, again, the industrial emissions directive and BATS techniques are applied throughout the country. So in this country, in fact, we have the municipality directly involved leading the pilot, the Sofia municipality. And we prove the usefulness of the methodology to address an urban issue, in this case, not an industrial one, that was food waste collection, that was optimized after running the pilot. The pilot also allowed to know that the other problem was not perceived as pressing as it was perceived by the municipality. And a very, very important finding in this pilot and in this country is that involving a municipality is not enough to trigger new policy making processes because of the internal barriers and the institutional changes that are needed also to uptake this new methodology. So an important key issue for this could be to align the project objectives with existing priorities of the authorities to build a win-win strategy. So as future recommendations, we think that policymakers should promote the dialogue to promote these new guidelines or regulations on other pollution. Local authorities should have the support and guidance for regional and national institutions. So we propose a multi-level governance model applied also in Bulgaria. And the methodology is important since citizens affected are also an important part of the solution, as was recognized by Sofia municipality. We are going to the United Kingdom now, where there is no national legislation. I know, Nora, thank you. So local authorities are again in charge of the other complaints, and there are several guidelines, as we saw this morning, that set limits at regional levels, such as H4 horizontal guidance. What we did in Dinosis was quite important. We involved the London Bureau of Ealing in the pilot to support the project, and they uptake in other collect as part of the complaints procedure. So we set an alert system for them for real-time monitoring, and they even hire a new environmental officer, and this allowed us to cross-reference an other episode with operations and will be continue to use in the future. So this is a very important achievement of an environmental authority uptaking the methodology officially. And our next steps are around access to information and access to public participation. The UK pilot is a good example that can be replicated elsewhere across the UK. And hopefully, we will be introducing the methodology in future UK guidelines after the standardization in Spain. Chile, I will not go very much into details because we will have Daniela in a few minutes with us. And she will be explaining the regulatory framework. And you know that they are now working on the draft of the first order regulation in the country for the pig sector. And what we did was to contribute to this draft because there was an open consultation for this. And also the policy brief adapted to Chile was distributed to the ministry and the regional authorities. So hopefully in the future of the regulations in Chile, they will include measuring at the receptors also and not also only at the emission side. Let's see what Daniela has to say about this in a second. And finally, Uganda, which will also be discussed later by Dr. Okrot. There is no standard assigned policy to address other issues to date. In 2009, the National Environmental Act implied new regulations, and by the end of 2021, Uganda will have the first draft of the air quality regulations that includes other measurement limits. In fact, this was an achievement that we did during the diagnosis because we were we were able to inform these air quality guidelines for Uganda to include the issue of odor pollution. And also we run a pilot with the schools and markets surrounding around waste odors in the markets. And the EMB, which was also participating in the pilot, ran some recommendations that were also distributed to other African countries. And well, the recommendation is also to deploy and building capacity amongst regulators and the public administration on the issue, and to report other nuisances impacting communities under which regulations can be enforced. And last but not least, Colombia. Sorry, I'm very late, but I will be very quick. And Colombia is the leading country in Latin America with a very nice regulatory framework there. Also, a lot of European and German standards have been adapted as Colombian standards there. And there is a resolution based on dynamic compactometry and dispersion modeling in place. And it is deployed after submission of one individual complaint of the authority. So currently, complaints are validated through surveys, not through citizen science. And depending on the results of the surveys, then another management plan shall be enforced. So what we did during the Dinosis, we ran a very nice conference there in Colombia. We will have the feedback also for co-creating the other observatory for more than 150 participants from the quadruple helix from Colombia. That was super nice. And now we are trying to apply and in contact with the ministry to use Odour Collect to improve data quality and time management for running all these surveys that are compulsory in Colombia once you have one odor complaint. So hopefully we will be collaborated with them in the future. So just to conclude, you see that this is a universe. No, it's a different universe for each one of the countries where we were working in. So there is still a long way to walk in the regulatory framework of others. And what we tried to achieve were two things on the interface of science and policy. The first one was to introduce Odour pollution in the policy agendas at the different levels. And the second one was to produce citizen-generated data to make informed decisions with the participations of the affected community. During our experience, policy societal dialogues played a critical role, so we strongly recommend to use this approach. And you know that we use this multi-level engagement model involving quadruple helix stakeholders and promoting dialogue, which is really, really important to promote and work towards participatory democracy. And that's all. Thank you very much. And sorry for the long time. And let me move very, very quickly. We will have an open session of questions at the end. To introduce you to our next speaker, just 1 second. I'm finding the right document. Here, yes, Ms. Nuno Lacasta. Nuno Lacasta has been working on environment and sustainable development for over 20 years in Europe and in the United States. Since 2012, he's been serving as CEO of APA, the Portuguese Environment Agency. He worked for academia and NGOs and as a consultant for international organizations such as the OECD, the UN, and the European Commission. Mr. Lacasta has been in public service since 2003, having led the Portuguese Environment Ministry's International Department, coordinated Portugal's climate policy, and directed the Portuguese Carbon Fund. In his capacity at APA, he served as Bureau EA, the European Environment Agency, and as OECD Environmental Policy Committee's chair. He holds a law degree from Lisbon University Law School, a postgraduate degree from the Washington College of Law, as well as the Advanced Management Program from Kellogg Business School. And he's also a member, of course, of the Dinosis Advisory Board. So welcome very much, Nuno. Welcome. Thank you very much for your participation.
Well, thanks.
The floor is yours.
Thanks very much for the invite. It's been a while since I've heard my resume resumed. So with that, probably it's been a few more years than the ones mentioned, given that time passes for everybody. It's a great pleasure to be part indeed of this project, because it's helped us immensely in preparing for Odour legislation in Portugal. We've had for quite some years now sparsely regulated odor-related standards, for instance, as part of pollution prevention permits, or, for instance, while also issuing permits for, say, landfills. But having a structured, comprehensive odor legislation, we don't yet have that. So a project such as this one is very, very helpful indeed, because everything that has to do with cross-fertilization, with benchmarking, with looking at people's practical experiences, with obviously looking at science-based decision-making, at even internet-based tools, as several of you are beginning to have with regard to monitoring and whatnot, I think it's very very helpful, and we as a result have benefited immensely from this project. And also because, as we all know, odor pollution is one of the major causes of environmental complaints to regulatory activities. In fact, from our experience, odor and noise are by far the most prevalent sources of environmental complaints in Portugal. And this, of course, means that we must legislate in this regard. But of course, it's a complex issue, because it's one that calls for multidimensional cross-cutting approaches. A lot of variables come to play, and in order to regulate this, we need to definitely learn from others. Oftentimes, we've seen ourselves in situations whereby we think we've sort of identified a source, but soon enough we go there, we do the studies, and it turns out it's not the only source. It's more complex. Or for that matter, we've had situations in the past where measures have been imposed upon companies, upon installations, sometimes even millions of euros of investment. And I'm talking, for instance, of pulp and paper industries. And still, after all those investments, there is an odor issue outstanding. And so the issue of cost benefit is also pretty central to some of our deliberations. We, of course, are aware that there are European standards to manage some particular issues. And of course, this audience knows them really well. Odor sourcing, odor source testing, odor dispersion modeling, or ambient odor monitoring. And we are working with all of those in crafting this legislation and implementation measures. Some of the measures that we are looking into to regulate this matter include, of course, performing risk analysis of odor generating facilities. We've looked at legislation and the practice of several European countries in this regard. Quantifying ambient air odor concentrations, again using existing European standards to monitor and to model the normal operations of an odor source. Fixing maximum emission rates for mixtures of odorants and individual chemical species. Considering the number of complaints received or annoyance level determined via community surveys. This is a very powerful tool, which we're looking into. And of course, most prevalently also requiring the use of best available techniques to minimize odor emissions using recommended technology. And against this backdrop, of course, which is eminently a technical backdrop, using tools such as citizen engagement, and I'm really glad to also see that this project is very much focused on the issue of citizen science, citizen engagement, something which, of course, in this realm is pretty central. I've learned throughout the last couple of years that you need to create a sort of a theoretical nose, perhaps that's the name for this project, whereby you it's sort of a compound of the typical odor sensitivity. And this is a fascinating discussion, but at the end of the day, it's really the ability that we have to, as a result of people's engagement, to confront ourselves and regulated entities in order to apply specific measures. So I think that's very important that we use all these new tools going forward, because indeed at the end we need to have tailor-made, multi-tool, integrated strategies to regulate this this challenge. And with that, I think it's also relevant to bear in mind the following, as we, and certainly that's the case in Portugal, as we move towards more selective separation of waste, say, whereby we're now moving very aggressively towards separating bio-waste, and as a result, we're seeing more and more community compost facilities. All of a sudden, we have a new challenge given in relation to odors spreading at the very core of cities, which we didn't have before. And so this is an interesting challenge that we also need to look to see going forward, and one which, of course, we're very much interested to learning from others around the world. So in short, from our perspective, we're preparing legislation in this regard. This will include pilots. This will include, as I said, risk assessment, an integrated approach. This will include, perhaps even before this legislation is approved, because I foresee it to be a subject of intense discussion, including lobbying from stakeholders. Our strategy is to put forward first an odor mitigation guidelines, which we've just finalized, will be published soon, and as I said, with pilots, and also putting out at some point a citizen engagement tool. And with all of that, we're hoping to create, let's put it this way, we're all hoping to create a constituency that allows us to move forward with actually putting out legislation. Of course, this would be more facilitated, I can't hide it, if we were at a point in the European Union to indeed have specific regulatory instruments in this regard. But of course, that's just something we'll need to keep on working going forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nuno. Super interesting. And thank you for the update on the wonderful work that you are doing in Portugal. Indeed, it's not easy. So I wish you the best of lucks. And just in case it helps, in Catalonia, when we tried to have this draft regulation in 2005, yes, it was a lot of industrial opposition. But one of the reasons, from my perspective, that why this regulatory initiative failed was because it was not didn't take into account the nuisance on the population. So all the activities were involved in the new regulation. So they were all obliged to measure odor pollution, etc., even though they were not causing a nuisance. And that's why probably the opposition of the industries was stronger. And in fact, maybe it is not necessary to regulate if you are not annoying anyone, no? Because you are in the middle of the countryside or whatever, no? This was one of the issues in Catalonia. And I would like to ask you a question. In this complex regulatory framework in which you are working in, how do you think that citizens can contribute, or where do you see citizens' contribution in these guidelines or regulations? And do you think that we can even set limits for their perception, for their frequency of exposure to ambient odors based on their own perceptions?
Well, I hope I understood your question, and I would say on three levels. Well, the first and more obvious level is, as we sort of go forward with these pilots, to ensure that citizens are involved from the outset, because that input will be very relevant. Also, because those pilots will include citizen engagement as part of the setting of the learning by doing. It'll include companies, it'll include citizens, and this moves me to the second layer, which is, we found from other countries' experiences and also our own, that it's at the local level that these things need to be addressed. In other words, company A, again, a pulp and paper company, for instance, and these are concrete, real examples, they set up a commission with citizens, not only for odor reasons, frankly, for a whole host of other reasons, in order to engage with them. And then the next question becomes, if I understood what you're saying, is at some point, whether we regulate this, whether we create metrics that bind the company and in fact, for that matter, the stakeholders to monitor going forward. And indeed, we're looking at methodologies for that. A few of them are out there, as you know, and this project has mentioned quite a few other. And with that, we're going to be trying to put forward something that is practical, and perhaps most importantly, we're going to be doing this gradually. We want to make sure that we move from no legislation to a legislation that, broadly speaking, people engage with and are willing to accept. Let's see how that goes.
Yes, very good luck for that. And thank you very much for your intervention. I'm sure that Apia will be there also to contribute. And of course, you can count on us on anything that you need. And thank you very much for your support throughout the project and for your work in Portugal. So let me move to the next country. We have Chile now. We are moving to the other side of the ocean. Have Daniela with us today from the Ministry of Environment in Chile. Hola Daniela, me alegro mucho de verte. Let me introduce you very quickly before I give you the floor. Ms. Daniela Camaike holds an environmental engineer degree and master's in environmental sciences and policy, specialized in regulating odors in the environment with more than 10 years of experience. Currently, she works as coordinator of public policy development for Odour Pollution at the Chilean Ministry of Environment, which the mission is to lead sustainable development through the generation of efficient public policies and regulations, promoting good practices and improving citizen environmental education. Hola Daniela, de nuevo, and I think that you have a lot of interesting things to explain about Chile.
Hi Rosa, thanks for the introduction, and hi everyone. I'm delighted to be part of this event and represent my country because we are in a very important period against odor pollution, because we are elaborating the first odor regulation. And now I will present our path toward odor regulation and the connection with citizens. Firstly, I like to mention that the Ministry of Environment in Chile has a specific department on noise, light, and odor pollution. There are not many more countries in the world with such department who lead very citizen issues. And the starting point of odor public management was in 2012, when there was a socio-environmental conflict owing to an odor pollution event provoked by a piggery farm located in a town called Freirina in the north of Chile. Now, I will show you the odor public management strategy in Chile. The Freirina conflict mobilized the Ministry of Environment to develop a document called Strategy for Odor Management in Chile, published in 2013. Before starting the regulation process, we adopted 6 international standards for odor measurement in order to be able to define the measurement process. In addition, several studies were carried out in Chile related to the future regulation. For example, studies with the diagnosis about our reality, international background, and economic and social evaluation of future regulation. We published other technical guidelines. For example, we already published a couple of years ago the guideline for odor impact assessment of new developments or modification to existing facilities. And later, we published a guideline which advised how to implement an odor management plan. So during that time, we needed to learn deeply the topic. Thus, we organized seminars. 2 international seminars were held in Chile. We organized a lot of workshops, and we already have a website. After our detailed diagnosis, we decided to develop odor regulation for specific productive sectors. So now we are undertaking the preparation of 3 odor regulations by productive sectors. Firstly, for piggery farms, secondly, for the fishing industry, and thirdly, for the pulp mill. For the standard of pig farms, we already have the final project, and it will be the first odor regulation in Chile. Next, I am going to show 3 pictures with our reality between odor emitting sources and communities. In the photo, inside the yellow line, there is a piggery farm in front of a residential area. The Google Maps show that there are only 50 meters between them. Literally, they are just across the road. This situation is hugely common with other productive sectors in Chile as well. In the next photo, we can see the city of Coronel in the south of Chile, where near to the arrows, there are 7 fishing industries inside the city in an urban area. And in the last example, the photo shows a pulp mill where it's not necessary to show, where is the industry and the citizens. And we have 8 pulp mills in the south of Chile. This sector already has a regulation, but related with gases and not odors, controlling its emission at a specific point of the process. For all of these examples, it's not rare that in Chile, odor pollution is the second most common reason for citizens' complaints after noise. And for that reason, we believe that developing an odor standard is only a part of the solution. Thanks to our strategy, we advance in other actions in addition to the regulation in order to strengthen its implementation and other actions as well. Our next step is to continue the implementation of the odor management strategy, implement odor management in local environmental management of municipalities, because we strongly believe that for sure, empowering citizens to collect odor data will contribute to prevent, reduce odor emission from different emitting sources. And I invite you to visit our website and our Instagram as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela, very much for this very nice introduction. I admire very much the work that you are doing in Chile to address odor pollution. And let me check if we have some questions for you. But I will advance one, and I will make one similar question to the one that I addressed to Nuno. Where do you see this the citizen participation in all this regulatory framework? How do you think that citizens can contribute?
Of course, that they can contribute because they can inform if there is an event, odor event, and in the regulation we had one requirement about that. For example, if the industry has one event, odor event, they have to inform to the citizens. On the other hand, we believe that we don't want to put all the action in one regulation. For that reason, we have the strategy. We will have at least 3 regulations by sectors, but in parallel, we would like to do, for example, actions in the municipalities. In that way, we would like to, for example, elaborate guidelines for the municipalities, tools, mapping, questionnaires, in order to increase the participation of the citizens through the municipality, and then for sure we will improve the implementation of our regulation. I would like to transmit that not only is the regulation, it's important to add other actions as well.
That's very, very interesting, Daniela. I think it will be very useful, as you mentioned, to implement or to help implementing the regulation when you have a more overall view on the nuisance and the perception of the citizens. Thank you very much. I think that we do not have. Let me see. One question.
It's our website. Thank you, Carla. Because
Yes,
she
and
posted our website.
I don't think that you mentioned that you run an open consultation process for your regulation. Maybe you
Yes,
can explain a little bit
yes,
about
and
this.
in that stage, thanks for your observations. We received around 300 observations, and we still are answering that questions
Yes, you have
because
a lot of work.
we are in that period. It's a lot of work, but for sure we will improve our the first draft to the final draft. We will improve it thanks to the observation.
That's very nice, Daniela. Thank you very much. We are eager to see the result of this consultation process on the first regulation of others in Chile. Thank you very much for being here and very nice to see you. Let's move to the next country. We are changing continents again, and we are moving in this case to Uganda. Let me introduce Dr. Tom Okrot. He is a professional in the fields of natural sciences, environmental sciences, and technology and climate change. He has applied and practiced his vast knowledge in science, environmental issues, and climate change in development and management of natural resources in the last 30 years at international, regional, and national settings. He was until July 2021 the Executive Director of National Environment Management Authority of Uganda. He is a natural science graduate from Makerere University and University Ibadan, Nigeria, and environmental science and technology masters and doctoral graduate from University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. He was part of the team that championed the air quality agenda, leading to the formulation and development of the national air quality regulations and guidelines in Uganda, and member of the advisory board of dinosaurs. So welcome, Dr. Okrot, and many thanks for being here. The floor is yours.
Okay.
You are mute, I think. Now, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I was saying that for me, the dinosaurs project inspired us into the activities that we were doing, because after interaction and hearing what the team in Europe was doing, dealing with the order issue, ours was not yet order. The issue of order was there, but the government system said we don't even have the higher value aspect of air quality. So first, through consultations and again through pressure from the public, it was quite obvious that the major problem for the community was mainly issues of order and noise. That was a complaint of the community. But it is in order to move through this, the government decision was that let's first start and discuss the issue of the air quality in general, and then come to do the issues of order, which are very specific to industry, like the piggery industry, the farm industries, and so forth. Those guys who deal with these hides and skins, theirs is quite unique industry in terms of odor pollution. So, well, that's exactly where we started from, and so I must say that the project or the dinosaurs grade informed us, but it's agreed that after the general air quality guidelines which have been developed, which are general specific order regulations will not be developed, but it will be localized according to industry, and also some municipalities will allow something unique. So that is that's the main. So what I'm presenting here is sharing what the project informed us and drove us towards. Some of it is mixed up with the other, Now, Uganda, we have a lot of combustible biomass for cooking and firewood to bring issue for air quality disturbances, but also the vehicles, motor vehicles, you see we have many second-hand vehicles, motorcycles, and whatever. The really problem the public. We had the challenge to look at the regulation in terms of air quality to get things arriving from transportation from Europe. Because during the season, also we get imports of air quality masses from Europe coming to Africa. They carry all sorts of things with them. So this is the genesis of our discussion, and this is what we identified as the sources of air quality disturbance. Now, let's found out that worse in urban areas, air quality status, and definitely when I talk about air quality, for the population to the order, it's worse in urban areas. Sometimes in some urban health centers, the complaint by the public really about the smell that is coming from high concentration of vehicles, motorcycles, people in the confined area. So, main problem in all cities. In our city, Kampala, that's a challenge. Now, the National Environment Management Authority, where I used to work, was tasked with this aspect, and we had to identify where do we tackle, what are the areas, what are the fundamental areas where we have this challenge most. And we found out that most of the odor and air quality problems are originating from motor vehicles, because our country allows importation of second-hand vehicles, which have a compromising issue with the efficiency of combustion. Municipal waste, another refuse. When they do that, and you can find when the municipal waste is burnt, it's not only just not the smoke. And now, in the context of
Yes, sorry, Tom. I think that we cannot hear you anymore. Probably you have some problems with your internet connections. Let's see if it improves, hopefully. Can you hear us? Let's see if we recover him. It happened this morning also, but we were lucky. Let's hope that we have the same luck now. Okay, I think that you are trying to reconnect. I ask you for your patience to see if we can recover your very interesting presentation for Uganda. Meanwhile, as you know, we ran a pilot in Kampala that was very successful, even though we had the COVID pandemic in the middle. And we involve a lot of schools and children there. It was really fulfilling because we have wonderful videos that I encourage you to take a look at our YouTube channel and also the other observatory, because they are super nice. And we were also working in Kampala markets, especially with women, to improve waste management there, and through the perception of others, in fact, because in Kampala, what we experience is that people is not so aware of air pollution, but they can smell the others. So they are usually complaining about the others instead of complaining about air pollution per se. So this was a very interesting experience also for the Dinosis project. And let me check if we can recover Dr. Okrot, or if not, maybe we can move to the next speaker, and then we can come back later to this presentation if he can make it. Because I think he's totally out of the room. So maybe I can call Cynthia, if you are there. Who is the next speaker? Yes. Thank you very much for saving the situation. Let me move, yes, to your presentation here, and then we will recover Mr. Okrot's presentation if he's back. And yeah, we already know you, so I will not introduce you again. And please, the floor is yours to talk about the Spanish standard.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rosa. Thank you all for attending this afternoon session. And as Rosa explained, I'm here to talk about the standardizing methodology based on citizen science to monitor odor pollution. This is a work that has been developing in Spain. And I'm going to explain a little bit how it started and how it's going. So, wait a minute, I cannot. No, sorry, yeah. Wait. Just one. Okay. So as you can see here, there are many methodologies for assessing odor impact. We have mentioned for sure these days a couple of them, such as the dynamic olfactometry plus use of dispersion models. We have also the field inspections, field olfactometry, etc., etc. And also, as you can see, some of them are standardized, but some of them there are not. So that's why we are here also. We are trying to standardize another methodology, in this case, the mapping annoyance through citizen science. Yeah. This methodology is not aimed to change the traditional approaches that are based on standardized or existing methodologies, but the idea is to complement the available tools that are already in the market. And when others cannot be used, or maybe the results that we are having are not the one that are expected, pues due to measurement uncertainties or because we have unknown sources or whatever, we could complement this other study, or with this kind of methodologies with citizen science. I invite you also to check this deliverable that was prepared through dinosaurs, in which in the chapter 2, more than 10 methodologies are reviewed, in which you can see the method description, a background, and the most useful information for me, that is the applicability and the limitation for its tool. So I invite you to read this. Okay, so so the development of this new Spanish standard on odor monitoring through citizen science has a previous step to eventually become it a European standard. So as a result of the impact collected achieved by dinosaurs, as you already know, and its main objective that it is create standardized methodologies and impact criteria and provide common scientific guidelines for policy making. Now we are going through this the development of these Spanish standards. The development is accompanied in this case and advised by the Spanish standardization body, that is the UNE, in which we have signed a contract during this year through the Spanish standardization body and the Amigo Association. And although the work started 2 years ago in 2019, and we have received financial support for all the people of the entities that are working on this development through the Amigo Association and also from the dinosaurs project. So thank you all. As you can see here, the main objective of this standard is to establish a common methodology to identify and assess the odor impact issues by conducting citizen science, and also to provide a guideline for the registration, research, and assessment of the causes of odor nuisance. The idea is that anyone that can develop a study of odor mapping through citizen science using this methodology could do with no much expertise on the field. The idea that anyone can use and can reproduce this kind of studies. Okay, so here I present you a small index that has been proposed from the group, and it's also trying to comply with the standards structure of the UNE. And the work to develop for completing all the information that is needed in this index has been split in 4 different groups that I'm going to present after this. Oh, wait, sorry. Okay, so here you can see that we have split the work in different working groups. We have group coordinator, and the group coordinator has split the job, the work in 4 different groups, tasks. The group task 1 will be in charge of participation and transparency. The task group 2 is in charge of development of methodology. The number 3 will work on is working on plausibility verification, and the last group, the group number 4, is trying to provide a term and definition in order to homogenize the text. So for now, the working group is composed more or less for 22 people, and the best part of this is that the group has a wide expertise, because we have different groups that have expertise on Odour pollution, and others that have expertise in citizen science, and others that are from public administration. So you can see that due to the wide expertise of the group, that it is also that we can say that we comply with the quadruple helix. We are trying to put all our knowledge in this standard. So let's talk about the first group that is working in participation and transparency. So this first group is based for sure in citizen science methodologies, as it is dealing with participation and transparency. The pilots of the dinosaurs and has provided a lot of information for the development of this group, and also several other tools that we have been using in the market for the last 10 years has provided a lot of information that we can use for the development of this part of the standard. This standard, as mentioned before, use the quadruple helix engagement model. So define all the actors that should be involved in this kind of project. In the first case, the potential Odour impact emitters, so should be any activity that is a potential Odour emitter. The potential receptors of the Odour impact, that will be the citizens. Government authorities, so that are usually in charge of the permitting or controlling the permits of the kinds of activities or industries. And last but not least, also universities, research centers, any other organization, NGOs, etc., that can work as a bilateral group. So what needs to be done in the group? So the idea is one that we have mapped all the main stakeholders for each project. In this case, action groups shall be created in which all the stakeholders should be participating. This is the idea that a interdisciplinary team should be created, and all the groups could participate on during all the project. This action group will be responsible for elaborating an action plan with the action that needs to be proposed, organizing the meeting, establishing dates, and establishing an overall objective of the project. Also, the action group will be in charge of creating a communication plan that will be defined in order to establish the ways of communicating with all the stakeholders and also internally. Okay, so now let's go talk about the methodology. In this group, they are dealing with first of all, they are dealing with the evaluation of the area that must be defined for the project. We cannot use a huge area, and also trying to identify the Odour emitting activities and the Odour emitting sources, if it is possible. The number of participants needed for the project, and for this it could be useful to check, to have a look at the previous Odour complaints that has been register on the area in order to establish more or less the quantity of complaints per year and the location, so we can try to define a proper zone or area for the project. Also, in order to try to be completely inclusive, trying to be that all people can participate on this kind of project, they have been established 3 different formats for the data collection. For sure, the first one, the easiest one, is to collect all the information on paper. Another way to collect this information would be through a digital format like a website. And the easiest way, or well, the most common way that it is used right now in a lot of projects that are being developing in the world, is through smartphone apps. So from that, in this case, we have the Odour Collect app that has been used for the 10 pilots, or not the 10, but for most of the pilots of the dinosaurs project. And last but not least, this group also needs to define the minimum criteria, the minimum data that requires to be collected and to be asked to the citizen science, to all the citizens, in order to be analyzed later, and that all the projects can be comparable one to another. So that's the idea of standardizing a methodology. And the third group is working with plausibility verification. So the idea of this group, or the task, is to provide some tools to the future users in order to check the plausibility. What that means? Okay, that means that when we have an Odour register or another complaint, that we can check if this Odour can be assigned to any of the industries or activities that we have around, because it's quite common that a lot of industries are nearby. So sometimes it's difficult to establish which is the responsible of this of this Odour impact. So there is already one standardized way to check, for example, see if an Odour specification came or not from one source specifically, that was developed by the German standard BDI 3883 part 4, that deals with how to process with other complaints. So we have established this criteria for the basis for our first tool as a plausibility check, just having the direction of the wind and the point where the Odour complaint was registered. We established like an angle of this is an angle of 30 degrees for its size. So try to see if there is another source in that area. And for this, for using this methodology, we will need meteorological data for sure, one direction, and but also we could use the weather station. So we are established also the use of weather station for the plausibility check. Besides the BDI German guideline, the standard, the weather station, we have also other tools available on the market that should be the weather models, the transport models, the Odour dispersion models, and the last one, the instrumental Odour monitoring system. For all these tools and methods to be used for the plausibility check, we have decided to establish like a minimum criteria to be used in each project. Besides, we have also described the advantages and disadvantages of each tool, because depending on the project, you could see that maybe one tool is not the best option for your project. And also extra recommendations just in case you decide to use one tool or another, like having like a minimum criteria in order to choose between different types or brands in the market. So we have decided to establish like that information and minimum criteria, but and not recommend just a couple of names of any entity or any company. So we have been talking about this since 2019, as I'd said before. We have the COVID lockdown in the middle, but we continue working through our online platforms. And yeah, and also yeah, here it is, the group of term and definition that was created a bit after the first groups were created. This group was created in order to homogenize the test, to use a common vocabulary for all the groups, as we were working separately, and in order to have like a common line for all of the team. As you can see, if we were working just with online meetings, it was a bit confusing. So just as conclusions here, I can think that this is a great achievement for the DNOSES project. As we have been talking this morning, it seems like DNOSES projects arrive just in the right time. So it has been served like a push for trying to serve a push for launching for this standard. With this standard is trying to complement the available methodologies. It's not our idea to recommend one in front of another, just to complement the available ones. Having a standardized methodology will help in order to compare projects, and in order to all people to have a common approach to all of them. And also we are trying, as the DNOSES project, place the Odour pollution in policies agenda. That's the main idea. So I don't know if I'm on time. I want to thank all the team that is working on the development of the standard, because they are working in their extra hours, and they are collaborating a lot. And just to tell you that what are the new steps and ideas that are coming soon. We hope to have the first draft by the end of this year. I cannot promise that, but that's the idea. It will be nice to have it published for the next year. We will try to translate it into English after it is published, so we can try to create for now a guideline, an international guideline if you want. But the idea is to try to make it an European standard after the approval of this Spanish standard. And for sure, we are actually working on several other international, national guidelines from the Amigos. So I invite all of you to visit also our website and have a look and check if you can collaborate with any of these. That will be great. So thank you all for listening, and that's all.
Thank you, Cynthia. I totally agree with you that this is an extremely important work that we did, and it will contribute very much to increase trust in citizen-generated data and for the official uptake of the methodology by environmental authorities. So that's great. And not only I would like to mention this for the other community, but for the citizen science community.
Yeah.
Since we believe we have not found any evidence against this, that this could be the first technical standard with the name citizen science on the title. So this could be a very, very big achievement for the whole community. So thank you very much for this. I don't know if there are any questions, but I don't think so. And I know a lot about the standard, so I don't have any questions for you. No, there are no questions.
Okay.
So
thank you very much, Cynthia.
We can pass to the other session. Good afternoon, everyone. I will take this opportunity to introduce Rosa, that has been presenting a lot this morning, but we didn't have the chance to introduce her as we were running out of time. So I'm very pleased to present her for you. And Rosa Arias is a chemical engineer, author, and citizen science expert, CEO and founder of Science for Change, creator of the app Odour Collect, which has won the prize Singular for the Prismas 2021 project. And she is, as you know, the coordinator of the DNOSES project, which has developed an innovative methodology to create alternative solutions to monitor Odour pollution through citizen science and participatory strategies. She is also coordinating the New CIRA project, that aims to co-design innovative communication strategies to reach quadruple helix stakeholders, and the Catalan cluster of the Transform project that aims to introduce citizen science into the Catalan 3 to boost innovation and evidence-based policies. She is also an active member of the Spanish initiative Science in the Parliament, which has promoted the creation of a science office to inform the Spanish Parliament. She is also a member of the board of directors of the European Citizen Science Association. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you very much. You see by my curriculum that thanks to the diagnosis, I should say that I'm an engineer, but I'm trying to connect or to work more and more on the interface of science and policies to achieve real changes. So this is what we, in fact, try to do with Odour Pollution in diagnosis. And I'm very glad to present you our final presentation of this long 3 days for conference. Thank you very much if you have been with us this time. And I would like to present you the green paper on Odour Pollution, which aims to place Odour Pollution in the policy agendas, of course, by providing recommendations and working towards an improved regulatory framework in Europe. So let's see how this looks like. The scope and the purpose of the green paper, as you know, and I think that we have demonstrated during today's interventions from the different countries, Odour pollution at the global level is the second cause of environmental complaints after noise, and it leads to a significant decline in the quality of life of those affected and must be thus urgently addressed by policymakers. The Green Paper on Odour Pollution serves as a foundation for further development of research and plans by different stakeholders with specific objectives in Odour pollution and hopefully a planned future white paper. So we outlined the green paper, and what you see in the image is the policy brief that we defined at the very beginning of the project and paved the way to all the advocacy actions and ultimately to the green paper. We outlined it, this document, this policy document in 6 chapters. First one with an introduction. Second one discussing on how we can turn a challenge into opportunity with the green paper. Chapter 3 discusses our multi-level governance model in Odour pollution and the European policy context. And Chapter 4 describes citizen science as a necessary methodology to tackle Odour pollution. Chapter 5 describes the Odour Observatory and the civic right to contribute to environmental information, just going one step beyond Principle 10 of Rio Declaration. And finally, Chapter 6 outlines the way forward to introduce Odour pollution in the policy agendas. Of course, all this is complemented by the roadmap on governance that I presented earlier. So let me go into the details, but first, I would like to thank you also to the contributions of Colombia, our former project officer, Dr. Sven Schade, that was with us this morning, Professor Laura Capelli, which is our scientific manager for diagnosis, as you well know from presentations on Monday, and Professor Moh Jali, the mayor of Tamara in Morocco, which is also an advisory board member for diagnosis. So in the introduction, we remind the importance of Odour pollution, which is not just a nuisance, and it accounts for more than 30% of the citizen environmental complaints worldwide, and it has adverse effects beyond mere inconvenience. We have health-associated issues and also economic impacts, such as, for example, in tourism or in the loss of property values of the affected communities. It can also be connected to a fall of productivity, reduce economic activity, and lower house and community practices. So we need to take this into account. Chapter 2, turning a challenge into an opportunity. We believe that the growing public recognition of persistent environmental odors as a serious problem at an international level is another sign that the time has come to begin introducing odor governance to protect the exposed population. However, odor pollution is not tackled directly in any point at the Zero Pollution Action Plan, nor in the recently approved European Green Deal. But not everything is lost. The negative effects of persistent odors have got the attention and concern from international organizations. We believe that diagnosis also has contributed a lot to raise this awareness of different policymakers at different levels through all or project actions. And also the World Health Organization has affirmed that other nuisance affects our quality of life and therefore the social well-being dimension of health. Finally, the European Convention on Human Rights has explicitly said that smells can materially affect people's well-being and can be in breach of Article 8. So all this helps us to continue working towards an improved regulatory framework. And how odor pollution is an underestimated global problem affecting community. We know that the persistent exposure to odors can cause stress, anxiety, sleeping disorders, headache, nausea, eye and throat irritation, or increased respiratory problem. We know that it's under-regulated, and we know that existing regulations do not provide a whole picture of the problem because the impact in the population is under-considered or only estimated as an average. So we propose to use, as you know, our multi-level governance model, which is explained in chapter 3, together with the European policy context. And we already explained this a lot today. I'm not repeating myself, but you know that it's very complex to measure odors. Thus, it's very complex to regulate odors. Most of the countries still do not have regulations. The dynamic olfactometry is the methodology that is predominantly used in regulations worldwide. And in Europe, basically, odors are regulated through the Industrial Emissions Directive, the BREFS documents, and also the scenario regarding odor regulations is heterogeneous within the European member states, regions, and even municipalities. So it is time to advocate for a common regulatory framework at European level. So that's why we think that we need this multi-level governance to tackle odor pollution, because regulations at national and European levels are crucial to provide a fundamental framework and are even required to deal with other issues at the local level in some countries. So we need them. And DNOSIS proposes this multi-level governance model, which aims to involve all the different governance institutions at the local, at the national, at the European, and the global levels to better regulate odor pollution. And of course, I want you to remember that this governance model, as we saw during the presentation of the strategic roadmap, needs to be adapted for each one of the countries. Here, you can see in the picture some of the strategies that we use at the different governance level to engage with policymakers. At the local level, of course, we run citizen science interventions to gather citizen-generated data. We manage the community engagement. We promote participation and co-creation strategies to find improvements with all the stakeholders involved. And we produce these new sets of data that you can find openly at Odour Collective. You visit the website to inform the environmental authorities, the municipalities, and the other emitting industries to correlate the industrial operations with the citizens' observations to reduce the impact on the population. At the national level, we run policy societal dialogues, and we also promote opportunities or look for opportunities for citizen science to run these interventions at the local level, and also promote this improved or new regulatory framework in odor pollution. And for sure, at the global level, we run a lot of advocacy actions, and we participated in a lot of conferences and sectoral dialogues along the project. And for us, I want to stress again that it's super important to work with the quadruple helix model to guarantee success, and also from the bottom up in order to increase transparency, accountability, and confidence, again, in the public administrations and also in the rest of the stakeholders. Also, in this chapter, we explain how we are connected with Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration, which promotes the idea that all people should have adequate access to information, be adequately involved in decision-making, and have access to an open and fair justice system. And of course, the lack of consistent regulation on environmental odors can also block citizens and industries' access to legal recourse. And we advocate for the citizens' right to contribute to data. This will go one step and beyond Principle 10, because citizens would not only have access to environmental information, but they will be themselves producing this environmental information, thus contributing to this data. And we also consider in the whole process all the dimensions of the responsible research and innovation framework. Finally, we were aligned with the SDGs. In the Green Paper, you will also find the explanation why we are aligned with the different SDGs, especially with SDG 3, good health and well-being, SDG 11, sustainable cities and community, or SDG 13, climate action. Then we move to the next chapter. This explains why citizen science is a necessary methodology to tackle odor pollution. Just to refresh your memories, if you don't remember, we have two main methodologies standardized at European level and used in the existing regulatory frameworks to monitor odor pollution. They are dynamic olfactometry in combination with dispersion modeling and also field observations to estimate the frequency of nuisance. But usually these are top-down studies that so citizens do not have access to the results. They do not know the impact on their communities. There is no communication with the citizens. There is no transparency. And usually, because of this lack of regulatory framework, citizens are unprotected, and thus their quality of life is reduced. So we advocate for changing the paradigm, as you well know, and using the sensor as the nose as the best sensor to monitor odors, and change the concept of complaints by real-time monitoring of odor pollution. So producing odor observations with the affected communities to have a real-time account of the real impact, and to complement traditional techniques. You know already that there are a lot of techniques that can be used in the emission sources or in the emission area, so where the receptors are placed, and we are positioning citizen science here to cover this gap and account for continuous monitoring of odor pollution in real time. And we, in the document, we included a comparison, a very brief comparison of the different methodologies, explaining their limitations and justifying why we need to use citizen science to cover for this gap. And we also remind our phases of the methodology that we applied as an excellent tool to collaboratively tackle wicked socio-environmental challenges, both locally and globally. And also, we included the advantages for the different stakeholders that participate in the process. As you know, for the environmental authorities, this methodology offers the opportunity to determine the origin of the odor episodes, improve their quality, increase transparency and trust, improve the relationships with the community, and co-design solutions with the community and the involved industries to the issue to increase the quality of life of their citizens. For the citizens, of course, that they can actively participate in local decision making, also in this co-creation of solutions, and we can increase also their level of co-responsibility and even promote processes of behavioral change and increase science literacy. For the industries, they obtain new sets of data that are invaluable for them in order to optimize their industrial processes and reduce the impact on the population. They can also define odor management plans based on the real impact that can be affordable and can diminish the cost of other studies or of abatement techniques that they would need to apply to reduce the impact. Also, they improve their corporate social responsibility. And for the other managers, of course, we are advancing the state of the art of the odor management. We are putting odor pollution in the map. We are obtaining valuable sets of data, developing new technical standards, validating results of impact modeling if we compare with the citizens of observations or field inspections, for example, and we can also verify the effectiveness of deodorization techniques if we run studies before and after. finally, well, not finally, but almost, the chapter 5 explains what the Odour Observatory is about and the civic right to contribute to environmental information. You already know this if you were in the presentations of the first day of the final conference. The Odour Observatory was created to provide resourceful information about odors for all stakeholders, to begin to level the playing field and increase awareness and knowledge in odor pollution. So access and right to contribute to other information is granted by the Odour Observatory. Its web-based platform includes information on other issues, regulations, research, data collection methods, and potential mitigation measures or solutions. The information is also presented in an accessible format using plain, non-technical language that allows all stakeholders to gain a common understanding of the issues in odor pollution and management. And they can also contribute, as you know, we have some open maps, for example, the affected communities maps or the regulation map, where you can all map new communities or regulations. Also, we have another tool, which is open tool, open data, the app Odour Collect, so anyone can map odors perceived at any point of the globe, basically. And the components for the characterization of odor are the type and subtype, the intensity, the tonic tone, plus the geolocalization and real time of the observation. And here you have the example of Barcelona, where we gather more than 600 observations with the participation of the citizens. And finally, the way forward. How can we introduce odor pollution in the policy agendas beyond? Of course, we recommend to continue, and we will continue running our advocacy plan, even though the project is over, that Anastasia explained this morning. And some key points that we recommend is the inclusion of citizens, of course, in other regulations and management processes, since it is beneficial for all stakeholders, as it promotes scientific education, improves transparency and the relationships with emitting activities, and increase confidence in public authorities. Also, the Green Paper presents a brief overview of the Diagnosis multi-level governance model for action and the main advocacy results and recommendations towards this policy framework. And of course, the strategic roadmap complements the results of the Green Paper. And some examples, of course, what we will do next. Of course, we want to finish the work initiated to launch the Spanish standard that hopefully at some point will be updated at or uptaken at the European level. And for example, in Portugal, we will be following the process of this national regulation that Nuno was explaining before. And finally, we will continue also advocating at the global levels. And as Anastasia mentioned before, we had a very big achievement from yesterday with this new instrument to promote citizen science that a little bit was initiated by the statement presented in Diagnosis in 2018. So we are very happy about this. And finally, what we want to do is to try to push towards the white paper, since environmental odors are complex and multidimensional, and actions to minimize them needs to be established in the long term. So the Green Paper is focused on a multi-level approach combined with the different views and needs of the quadruple helix in order to be environmentally sensitive and cost-effective for Europe in general and for local authorities in particular. And Diagnosis placed the issue of odor pollution higher up in policy agendas and feed its findings and lessons into these processes. And the final desirable step is to turn these dialogues into a real European policy impact outcome, so citizens' voices are truly heard and transformed into regulations. So public debate should continue, ideally producing the European white paper on odor pollution. For sure, we will try to do that. And this is the end of my presentation, so I give the floor back to Nora.
Thank you very much, Rosa, for this insightful presentation. It's very emotional to see how we have run this project for 3 years and a half, and we have achieved so many things. And yeah, I would like to congratulate everybody that has participated. even our citizens from all the countries and all the pilots and all the stakeholders in general. So I think we have Tom back, and maybe he can finish his presentation. Florence is telling me. So I don't know if you would like to come back on stage, Tom, and be able to finish your very interesting presentation. I'm not sure if he will manage, because there's some connection problems in this regard. Okay, so it seems it's being difficult. So maybe we will see if there's any questions. Otherwise, we have some questions prepared for you. I think there's no
I don't think there are no questions, Nora. I think we can go to the interactive Slido that we prepared to see also the views from the audience.
So we have prepared a Slido for you, and I hope it's interesting enough for you to participate. So let me share my screen and see if... You cannot see it now? No. Okay. Yeah, I think now it's fine. So let me present you this Slido. You may find the number at the chat, and I will start the questions for you. So we would like to ask you to describe in one word, what do you think is the most important barrier for using citizen-generated data to inform public policies? So please go ahead with your answers. Maybe you need just some time to join. We have the first answers here. So the first barrier would be to use a top-down approach. So not taking into account, for example, the citizens' concerns. Let's see if some more people is joining. We have more answers now. So data validation would be another barrier. Trust, extra work for them. Trust in big, interoperability, rigidity of authorities, institutional barriers, of course. We have found this in our pilots also. Sometimes it's not only political will, but institutional and bureaucracy. Change of mindset. Bureaucracy. Great. Thanks so much. Some more. Right channels. That's very important, and I think we have spoken about this also, of the importance of being able to think about who to approach first or at what moments, and see also the political situation and the policy agendas. So the two more important ones would be data validation and trust. Maybe we need to pass on to the next question, because we have a few for you. So this is an open one, and it says, how can we increase trust in citizen-generated data for environmental monitoring? So how do we overcome these barriers? How can we do it? and how can we succeed on this? Interdisciplinary approach. I think that has been very crucial for Diagnosis, as we were other experts, citizen science experts, also associations, municipalities. So we also followed the quadruple helix approach within the consortium, and that has been very, very important and interesting. Citizens have the local knowledge, of course. The power of many, produce evidence and show the usefulness. Generating more data from the citizens to increasing engagement. With a proper training, any citizen can successfully contribute to science and therefore make science more socially rooted. Completely agree. Align science with society, engagement. Use positive experience, of course. I remind you also that we have the DIY guidelines that will be available and open access for everyone, and where we explain you our experience in Diagnosis, and hopefully it can be useful and more affected communities and more stakeholders can use it. Great. Involve recognized people. Good. I think we can pass on to the next question. Showing previous case studies. Thank you so much for your participation. That's the next one. So do you know any other citizen science initiatives that are currently informing policies or contributing to the monitoring of the SDGs? Could you give any examples? Let's see if you are aware of some initiatives. So some of them has been mentioned and described this morning by Dilek, by other colleagues. Marlene Litter, yeah. Diagnosis. Invasive species control. Yeah, some of those have been mentioned today. Very relevant projects in this regard. Great. Thank you so much. There's not any more. I will pass to the following one because we have a few and only 5 minutes left to be on time. So how do you think citizen science helps to better understand Odour pollution problems? So how can citizen science support to tackle this kind of pollution, which we have been discussing in these 3 exciting days of this conference? Generates new sets of data that cannot be obtained otherwise. Local knowledge. So the perception of our gnosis and the local knowledge of what it is to live with affecting by Odour pollution. Our gnosis are cheap and the best tool available. That's true. That's true. This is another positive outcome of this methodology, of course. Provides info not captured otherwise. Engaging citizens using simple language. We also need to adapt to the local context, of course, and adapt our tools and our methodologies to be successful. Bottom-up approach from the community's perspectives. Yeah, local knowledge is key, and of course, involving all stakeholders, promoting dialogue and transparency. I think it's been our aim, and I think it's the way. It's really the way to go. Perfect. Thanks very much for your answers. Let's go to the following one. Describe the current situation in your country regarding odor pollution, if you know it. Do you know any affected communities? Do you know if specific regulations exist at your national, regional, or municipal levels? Maybe you can just add the name of your country and then state a little bit what you know, or maybe what you have learned today, because some things have been discussed and described for some of the countries. I don't know how many countries do we have in the audience, but we have spoken about some of them. Spain, only some municipal ordinances, very different between them. A lot of affected communities, yes, indeed. We have a lot of affected communities in Spain, unfortunately, but fortunately, we are trying to move forward in this sense. So, only Spanish representatives? Maybe yes.
Go to next, Nora, because if not, we will not
okay, I go
be on time.
In one word, what do you find most innovative about the diagnosis methodology? Difficult one. Quadruple helix. So involving citizens, industries, authorities, and experts, inclusiveness. So taking into account the local context and trying to involve everyone from different social realities. Real gnosis, engagement is such a challenging activity. Impact, policy advocacy actions, engaging citizens. Everybody's heard. Bottom up. We really hope everybody's heard. That's the aim, and that everybody feels represented. Holistic approach. Great, thank you. I'm not sure if we have more. Yes. What benefits would portray the standardization of a methodology to monitor odor pollution using citizen science? Do you know any other similar efforts to standardize citizen science methodologies? Maybe that was for the increase on trust. Not sure if it was an answer from the last one or is this one, but it goes for both. Increase trust from environmental authorities to inform new regulations. Sure. Standardization leads to future regulations, enfranchisement of affected persons, communities. Interesting. Great, thank you. That's one of the last ones, if I'm not wrong. Describe in one word the multi-level governance model used in the Dinosis project. Let's see which words come to your mind. Challenging, yeah. Comprehensive, complex, ambitious, helpful, holistic. Holistic again, holistic, nexus. Great. Could you think of any, yeah, we're running out of time, right?
Yes, Nora, I was saying that maybe we...
So,
yeah, maybe we can close the slide because I don't want to retain people anymore. And I just want to share the last slide, Florence, if you can make it for me. Well, just to remind you that we will be having the event in the parliament to close finally the Dinosis project on the 28th. So please join us. There will be a lot of members of the parliament and many other people from the policymaker involved. So please come. And just I want to close this with a big thank you to all the Gnosis participants, the audience from today and from the other days. Infinite gratitude to the institutions, organizations, industries, and hundreds of citizens and quadruple helix stakeholders who contributed to our pilot case studies, to our advocacy actions, and to anything in the Gnosis, because we did a lot. And of course, without their contributions, the strategic roadmap and the green paper in Odour Pollution, all the results, etc., and the validation and the standardization of the methodology would have not been possible. So thank you very much to all of you. It has been a pleasure to work with you all these 3.5 intensive years, I could say, and I will close the final conference now. Thank you very much.